Well, it's 19 minutes before 8. Many of you would remember the Life Esidimeni arbitration hearings that really captured the imagination of all South Africans. Now, the Democratic Alliance has given the Gauteng provincial government 60 days to take legal action against those implicated in the Life Esidimeni tragedy. It has written a letter to Premier David Makhura and to Health MEC Gwen Ramakgupa, demanding that the officials, including former Health MEC Qedani Mahlangu, pay personally a share of the 159 million rand compensation that was awarded to affected families. At least 144 mentally ill patients died after being transferred to ill-equipped NGOs. And to further this discussion and the contents of his letter, discuss that with us, we join now by Jack Bloom, who's the DA's Gauteng Shadow MEC for Health. Thanks so much for coming through.
Good morning. Good morning.
This, of course, is a precedent-setting move. And why did you decide to embark on this course of action?
Well, we took legal advice, and there is an act called the Apportionment of Damages Act, in terms of which people who are jointly responsible for something can be made to pay a share of it. Now, obviously, we had the Esidimeni arbitration hearings, and the evidence there was very clear that the former Health MEC Qedani Mahlangu plus her two senior officials were heavily implicated as having caused the whole thing. Now, the award was 159 million rand in damages, which is a huge amount of money. It's had to come out of the taxpayers ultimately, but also the provincial departments in Gauteng, which obviously affects service delivery. So we feel very, very strongly, as I'm sure many other people do as well, that the perpetrators of this atrocity, quite frankly, need to be held personally accountable, both criminally, and we hope that the criminal case proceeds as soon as possible. But in the fact that financial compensation has been ordered by Judge Moseneki means that they should also pay part of that money. And in terms of the Apportionment of Damages Act, the provincial government can take steps to make sure that they pay out of their own pockets. So that's why we have written to the Premier and the MEC for Health saying you must take these steps and make sure that you recover as much of this money as possible. They should pay personally for the terrible damage that they did.
So the three top officials you talk about would have been the former MEC, Dr. Qedani Mahlangu. You've got Dr. Bani Silebano, who was the head of the Gauteng Health Department, and the Chief Director for Mental Health, and that was Dr. Makhura Manamela. How much are you expecting them to pay?
Well, they're all high earners, you know, in senior positions. The former Health MEC was earning 1.9 million rand a year. And she's also got a substantial pension fund, as do the other senior officials. So I think they do have substantial resources. And, you know, why should they retire with a large pension when people suffered, people died? And the provincial government's having to pay out a huge amount of money, and it must come out of their own pockets. So I think we have shown the provincial government that they can recover the money. We've given them 60 days to do it, and there's a broader deadline. There's a 1-year deadline. If they don't do this within 1 year, then they can't do it at all. So we will keep up the pressure on the provincial government to get the culprits to pay up.
And I'll press forward on that in just a moment. But, you know, did you think about how much you would expect each of them specifically to pay towards this 159 million rand?
Well, you know, quite frankly, without the three of them, none of this would have happened. So really, they are accountable for the whole lot. But this will have to be determined by a court of law. Provincial government will have to take the legal steps to go to court, and what apportionment of blame can be laid on them, which will be an interesting exercise in itself. But I expect it to be very high. And whatever money they've got in a personal capacity, they must pay. Honestly, why should taxpayers pay for this? What do taxpayers have to do with it? Why should other people suffer because of the cruelty and the negligence, the willful negligence? Because that was the finding of Judge Moseneki's arbitration hearing, that honestly, this was done despite all the warnings and really should not have happened at all.
With regard to this 60-day period that you've given the Premier to respond to you, and you talk about a statute of limitation with regard to this particular matter. Just explain that to us further.
Well, we gave the provincial government 60 days because it's a reasonable time period to respond. If they don't, we're going to follow it up with questions in the legislature and a motion. And we really want them to act, because if they don't act within 1 year since the award was made, then they can't do it. It prescribes according to law. So the provincial government must not protect former Health MEC Qedani Mahlangu. That's been our suspicion all along, that the ANC is soft on Qedani Mahlangu because she's one of them. She's a comrade. You know, for our president actually was on a march in Soweto some months ago, and he met Qedani Mahlangu, and this was President Ramaphosa, and hugged her. Publicly hugged her and said a comrade is always a comrade. So the ANC protects its own, and that's the problem. Why are they not acting against her? They protected her all along. You know, when the deaths were first announced in reaction to a question I posed in the Gauteng legislature, 36 deaths were the initial number that was given out. I said that she should have been fired. She should have resigned, of course, but the Premier should have fired Qedani Mahlangu, and he didn't. So she's been protected all along. She's still a member of the Gauteng Provincial Executive Committee. Can you believe that? Still a member of the ANC's Gauteng Provincial Executive Committee. They have a so-called Integrity Committee which has not acted against her. Now we're putting it very firmly to the ANC provincial government that she should be held personally accountable for the financial cost of this, and we do hope that the criminal case proceeds as soon as possible, because quite frankly she should get jail for this. I mean, the charges you could lay is murder, culpable homicide, fraud, theft, you know, all sorts of things, and this must go to court as soon as possible, and people should not be protected for their political connections.
And beyond raising it in the legislature, do you have any further recourse beyond that point?
Well, we will speak to our lawyers and see if we can possibly compel the provincial government to take what they should be doing anyway. But really, this is a test case. The ANC in Gauteng insists that they're fighting corruption. We're very dubious about this because they've allowed enormous corruption to go unpunished, and it's a question of accountability. So if the ANC in Gauteng is not prepared to take this step, then I think voters should assess this, and if they're serious about fighting corruption, you don't vote for the ANC in Gauteng.
So just coming back to the Life Esidimeni patients, you know, have all of them been accounted for to this point?
Tragically not. As you know, I laid missing persons cases with the police some months ago. I get regular reports, and the latest report, which I've also got from the Gauteng Health Department, is that 20 are still missing. 20 people. These are real live human beings that just disappeared. In fact, for 3 of the 20, we don't even have a name. Can you absolutely believe that? And I'm afraid that at this stage, missing, presumed dead, we might have to say. So the final tally might be more than 144 dead. If we really can't find people 2 years after they were discharged, I think many of them are probably dead, unfortunately. And how are we going to find 3 people? A name isn't even given. I mean, you know, the sheer negligence, treating people like cattle. You know, they were dumped onto buckies and carted away, and people got missing. And how do you do this? I mean, it just shows the callousness and the cruelty. And let me say, there's been no real accountability for this. You know, people should go to prison for this. And what we've done now with this Financial Accountability Act is that we're challenging the provincial government to, at least at this stage, recover some of the damages that have been awarded from the people who were responsible. And I can tell you now, if it wasn't for the former Health MEC Qedani Mahlangu, none of this would happen. It was her arrogance and the fact that she was protected by her political party, and there must be accountability for this.
And just a final one to you, Mr. Bloom, with regard to Judge Sedeke's order of compensation to the families, has that been fulfilled as yet?
Yes, the provincial government has paid the money. They paid it last month. They were given 2 months to pay it, 159 million rand. But Judge Mosineski also said that there could be further claims. So I do know that a lot of further claims have come in. This is all relatives of people who actually survived, but they'd get an award because of the pain and suffering. And that could be hundreds of millions, actually. So we haven't seen the end of the financial payments that need to be made. So that has not been concluded. The Premier's office says that they're assessing the validity of it, and they'll have to find the money somewhere. That's why it's very important that people who are primarily accountable make to pay for it personally, because otherwise it comes out of the taxpayer, other provincial government departments. It's going to be a lot more than 159 million rand because more claimants are coming forward. And of course, if they're entitled to it, it's absolutely what should happen, and there needs to be other forms of compensation, but nothing can bring back the lives that were lost. And we do need to see this in court.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Jack Bloom, who is the DA's Shadow MEC for Health here in Gauteng.